normal stuff. Normal stuff.
Amazing, amazing.
Let's go. I really got the feeling today that everything is going my way. Now this is what I'm talking about. Every time I see your smile, it makes me shout. Let's go! Let's go! Nothing's gonna stop us today. Get on the bus or get out the way. We're cruising with the radio on. So turn it up to 10. Here comes our favorite song. Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
Yes, let's go. It's another Sunday evening and an awesome episode of the Demystify, right? Power Series episode. Well, today we have an awesome guest, a recent MVP, cool guy, crazy stuff. And as always, I'm excited to bring these people to your homes, for you to learn and do crazy stuff. When we come back after our montage, I'm going to introduce this person, make a few announcements, and then we're going to get into the fun. By the way, sorry for the late transmission, technical challenges beyond our control, but hey, it's coming to you. Better late than never. So stick and stay with me. After this montage, we're going to get right into it. Yep, we are back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good dawn, wherever you find yourself. It's a rainy Sunday here in Accra, Ghana. It's been raining for some hours now. Hopefully nothing crazy happens, but it's been quite good considering, it's the weather has been a bit hot, but we're in the rainy season. Well, that out of the way, it is our series. Refreshing stuff on the Power platform. I bring to you MVP, crazy people, power addicts, power god, power goddesses, power magicians, power freaks. I mean, you name it. Anyone on the Power platform that's doing crazy stuff, I try as much as possible to bring them, on the show. And as always, before we get started, I always like to bring to you some stuff happening in the world of tech or in the community, so you're abreast with it. The first thing I want to talk about in today's session is actually dev around the sun. So if you're not familiar with it, it's basically kind of like a 2-day event where there's a lot of talk and presentations and demos just to raise funds, to help people affected with COVID. And it's starting on the 12th and the 13th of May from 12 noon UTC. And then yours truly, I will be speaking. Yes, with the likes of Troy Hunt, Scott Hanselman, Adam Kumoji, Richard Campbell. You think about them, all the cool stuff. Cool people are going to be there. And for me, I will be talking about some interesting thing. I'll be talking about beer and IoT, the never-ending story. Yes, I know, right? It sounds crazy. Well, that's what I'm noted for. So just make a date with me, and then I can listen. Trust me, you're going to have amazing fun. Well, with that out of the way, that's the main one we have. Hey, big ups to all of you who attended the Microsoft Business Summit online. Awesome event, great content. Shout out to Donna, to John, and all the team that made that happen. That was an amazing time. Now, to our star of the moment, to our star of the day. Let me get my sound effects ready. I always like to get my drum roll and everything ready so I can, so I can, I can do this. So, please help me welcome with drum roll and a round of applause, our MVP for tonight's event, Hadith. Welcome, man. You are live. What's up?
Awesome. Nothing much. Lazy Sunday afternoon. Um, Tired with my 1 year old kid running around.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
So
like we
no
have
more weekends.
we have a lot of things in common. We both recently got our MVP. We both have 1 year old, kids in the house, and she's got to the stage where she's walking, and it's crazy. Like you have to be running after her all like everywhere.
Yep.
It's crazy. But hey, with all this, we still make time.
Hmm.
Goodness, isn't that awesome? I mean,
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
so much for making it on. I appreciate that. It's
Thank you
just
for
one of the
having me.
things that the MVP community and even the non-MVP but tech community we appreciate a lot. And hey,
Yeah.
you don't have to be an MVP, you just have to be someone with a passion who loves what you do. And hey, let's share it. That's what the world is all about: sharing our
Yep.
knowledge and building bigger community. So Hadid, thank you very much for making this.
Thank you.
And as always, the very first part, my viewers and listeners want to know who is Hadid. How has your journey into technology been, the ups, the downs, the challenges, how you face them, what you made out of it, and then how how you fell in love with the Power Platform.
Sure thing. So I'm Hardit Bhatia. I'm an electrical engineer, which sounds a bit weird, but yeah, that's how I started. And straight out of engineering, I was hired by an IT firm. It's one of the biggest consultancy firms in Asia, Tata Consultancy Services. And I have no idea why they hired me because, well, I didn't know anything about coding. And from day one, I was supposed to code in Java, creating websites or web applications for banks, which was pretty exciting. But again, I had no idea, so I started learning Java, so on and so forth. Did that for 3 years, got inspired by all the financial knowledge that I gained. So did my MBA in finance, came to the US. Um, and once I was done with my master's, I moved around a lot of jobs. None of them made me happy. Um, I currently work for Hitachi Solutions. It's one of the biggest Microsoft partners, and I was in their field service practice, and we used to have an in-house software. And then I think in 2015 is when I joined Hitachi, and then in 2018 is when Microsoft acquired Field One. And
Mm,
as a Microsoft partner, we had a decision to make. Do we now implement Field One, or do we go against Microsoft and continue with our in-house product? So it was a pretty straightforward decision. Nobody wants to go against Microsoft. So, so yeah, and suddenly in 2018 end, all of my 4 years of work just vanished.
mm,
I woke up one day, everything is gone.
wow.
And then, yeah, we were told to join the CE practice, which is the CRM as we used to know it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started learning about CE. Honestly, didn't really like it. Um, so I was told, how about you study for MB200, which is a pretty basic certification for Dynamics and the Power Platform. So I started. I was stuck at the chapter that was Canvas apps, and I never went beyond that chapter. So I loved it. I really liked it, and I think the few things that I liked about Power Apps in general was, I could be anywhere in the world using anybody's laptop, but I
Yeah.
could still continue my project.
Yeah.
That was huge. And then second was like what I call it, instant gratification. You're
Mm,
creating something, you are seeing how it looks, and when you play it, that's exactly how it will look. And within minutes, you can see if whatever you made is working or not.
yeah.
So that element was a huge thing for me, especially because my dad has been a scientist or a researcher all his life. And one of my main questions to him is, did you ever do anything?
Yeah.
Did you ever see the results of what you did?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure he did a lot of cool things, but it can take years for research to show results.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So that is something I've never liked about any profession. If I'm doing something, I need to see the results right then and
Right
there.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Power Platform was perfect for that. And the surprising thing is, I started this journey last May, so May 2019, and so it's been 1 year, and I started all my contributions or sharing stuff with the community only in November. So it's only
Oh, okay.
been, I don't know,
Couple of
6 months
months.
or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But few of my friends, or what I've heard from them, is it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort.
Mm,
And my only suggestion to them is it will seem like a lot of effort or seem like a lot of time if you do it as a job.
mm,
Just do it, make it a part of your routine,
yeah.
and then it doesn't feel like another job or like a night job on top of your day job, which is what I did. I mean, I just loved helping people out. And the way I started was making contributions or answering questions on the forums.
Yeah.
It was not only helping people, it was helping myself, because most of my initial blogs were answers that I was able to get to on the forums. So if I would not have seen those questions, I would not have been able to venture into those
Exactly.
unknown territories, and
Yeah.
then I would never have known the answers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, one big suggestion to anyone is, before you start doing anything of your own, get into the community,
Yeah.
because you will not only help people, you will be helping yourself big
Self.
time.
Yeah.
So that's my crazy ride.
That's awesome. That it's something that we keep preaching and pushing for people to understand that
Mhm.
it takes all you have to do is just take that very first step. Because a lot of people think, oh, I can never get there. How do I do this? I mean, the people are doing all these crazy things. I will not be able to do that. But as soon as we bring them in and say, look, it's about taking that very first step. And once you
Mhm.
take the very first step, you're like, oh, you can do this. And you're right. The more you share, the more you answer, you learn a lot because you're actually exposed to things you don't even know. Like, oh, so I could do this. So I mean, that's a very, very great and powerful insight. Well,
Mhm.
today's topic, you're going to show us how to revamp our power up controls. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, I mean, what are controls? And then you can tell us how to revamp them.
So I'll give you a small story that I've heard multiple times. Whenever I used to work, or whenever I used to create a Power App and show it to anybody who had not worked in Power Apps, they used to be like, well, this is not really fun. They don't look like native apps on my phone. All of your controls are rectangles with sharp edges.
Yeah.
And the common theme was, I can look at a Power App and say, well, this is a Power App.
Yeah.
And the best example was a text input control. It's a pretty simple rectangle. When you click into it, the border expands to show
Mm,
that it's in focus. So there are some basic cool features for sure, but they are pretty basic out of the box. And by controls, it's not just the text input control, even the date picker control. So anything that you can, click on, or make a part of your app is basically a control. And while most of the out of the box controls help you get to the end result, they may not be the prettiest versions of themselves.
mm, mm,
And chatting one day with Alan Chai, and
yeah.
he has had a very strong belief in making Power Apps as cool as the native apps. And I was like, so I literally just opened my phone, looked at a few apps, and noticed what the differences were. And
Mm,
of course, there were many other differences, but the one that stood out the most was how the different controls look in native apps versus a Power App.
yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was how the thought process started. And then somebody redirected me to Google's material design.
Mm-hmm.
Google has spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources on figuring out what the standards should be for different controls, like a text input control or a tooltip or a floating action button.
Mm,
And I was like, if somebody has already done the work, why reinvent the wheel? Why not just use those standards and see if I can get to those standards using the out of the box controls?
yeah.
So I'm sure that there can be PCF controls and stuff like that, but let's be honest, I have absolutely no idea how to create one. And I wanted to keep it simple, using this out of the box controls to make one that looks pretty. So that's how this started, and then that's how I got to the text input control, tooltips, floating action buttons, and then the other aspect of this, which I want to share because it's another example of how the community can give you ideas.
Yeah.
So there was a question on Twitter by Matthew Devaney. He said, which control irritates you the most? Which control do you hate the most? And as soon as I read that question, I was like, well, the answer is pretty simple. Others may not look pretty, but they still meet your needs. But the date picker control does not allow you to customize it at all. You cannot resize it.
Yeah.
You cannot change the color. Sure, you can change the color to any of the theme colors that are available in PowerApps, but what if your custom theme, what if your company color standards are not part of one of those themes?
Yeah.
Then you're forced to pick a theme that is
Yeah.
close to your color scheme, but you will never get to the exact color. And there were many such features. I wrote like 5 responses on Twitter just to answer that one question. So that was how the second one started in my mind, that I needed to revamp the date picker control. And when we get to that, I'll show you how simple that was. It took me like 15 minutes
Wow.
to create a revamped date picker control, and I've been so happy to share that with the community.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, that's something you want to, first people will be like, okay, once you get the functionality working, yes, it's good to you because you want the app to look cool, not just just functionalities and all that. And like people like yourself, Alan and Brian, oh, you guys take it to like the next level. And it's a question I keep getting. People are asking, oh, how can I do this? How do I do that? Well, today you are the expert and the boss himself to show us how to do.
Just one clarification though, Brian
Yeah.
and Alan are way above my level for sure. That's okay. I'm just literally at the first step of that ladder, and they're probably at the 100th story right now.
No, but it still counts. It still counts. But the good thing I like about them is the fact that they encourage you. They let you know that you can do it. It's not far fetched. It's just a
Right.
matter of just understanding the principles and applying them, which I'm sure you're going to share with us today. So we're all going to see how that works. Nice and easy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool. And I guess one more suggestion, feedback, whatever you want to call it, to anybody who wants to begin this journey before I get started with the app is there will be a lot of distractions. There will be a lot of disappointments. You might create one of the best blog posts that you think is awesome. You post it on Twitter or you share it on LinkedIn, and you might get like one like.
Oh yeah.
And you will be like, well, I thought that was awesome, but people are not liking it. I don't think my blog posts are making any impact, so I'm just going to stop.
Mm.
That is the biggest mistake. Do not assess your impact by number of likes
Yeah.
or number of shares or number of retweets, because those things eventually will happen. And believe it or not, you're always making an impact, even with a very simple blog post. That was just one of my spiels that I really wanted to share with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, before you go on, I think it's something I also want to really talk about. Like, up until we didn't have Power Series up until like beginning of this year.
Mhm.
It was after my meeting with Donna in Nigeria in December that I was like, I'm starting a Power Series episode because I had already two shows running, the IoT, the functions, and then I had Demystify running on Sundays. Like, you know what? I'm going to run this. And like you said, my very first stream, like nobody watched, like zero view. Like sometimes a week or two, like one, two. But like you said, it it didn't discourage me. And I always remember something that Scott Hanselman said: stay consistent.
Mhm.
Stay consistent. And I made it a point that hey, it doesn't matter if it's 0 or 1, but I'll make sure that every Sunday I have something coming on. I have something running. And look at where we are now. Like we had the likes of yourself, Samit Saini, like Donna has been on it, Alan has been on it, like all the crazy people have been on it. So It's a really, really crazy and really, valid point. Don't be worried about the numbers. And this goes to everyone starting a blog, a community, a channel, a podcast, whatever it is. The most important thing, consistent. Keep doing it. It's going to get to the point people are going to be like, oh, why haven't I been, watching this or reading this?
Yeah.
Just keep doing it. It's going to pay off.
Yep, exactly. And I think that applies to anything in life.
Yeah.
Do not assess, do not base your decisions on social media. If you want to do something, just keep doing it. You will eventually get the recognition that you want.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, take it away from me, Hadith. It's all yours.
Sounds good. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, we can see your screen now.
Awesome. So I'm going to give a
what you can
preview.
do, Hadith, is you can probably minimize my yes, because sorry, good, perfect. We're good to go.
Awesome. So the first thing I wanted to do was to give you a preview of all the controls that we will look at, and then we'll get into each one of them and try to recreate as many as we can given the time that we have on our hands. And if we run out of time, I'll still talk about the approach that I took to get to the end results. Okay, with that said, this was the app that I'd shared, which has three revamp controls. The first one, as you can see, is a text input control. Second is tooltips, and I'll tell you why I thought about revamping the tooltip functionality. And then the third one is the floating action button, which makes a lot of sense for a mobile app because you don't have a lot of real estate. So if I click into this, this was a call button, and I might have a few related functions, so to speak. So I might have a few related apps in here that do the same thing. And when that happens, you can have all of them hidden behind one control and then let them expand when the user wants to click. The alternative to this would have been, I don't know, a menu at the bottom, at the footer, or a menu at the header, or even a side menu. And then they would have been visible all the time, taking up at least a little bit of real estate, which now I can use for other things. So I really like the real estate usage of this control. So that excited me a lot. And the fact that, there was a smooth transition that I had to implement, that was something that excited me. And then the text input controls. So like I was saying, PowerApp text input controls allow you to have a hint text. And then obviously you have border, you have a focus border, and so on and so forth. But what Google said was when a user clicks into it, and in PowerApps, when you click into it, the hint text goes away. So the user, once they click into it, do not know what the hint text was or what were they using this text input control for. Now what happens is when I click into it, not just the border at the bottom becomes more prominent, telling the user that this is the field you are in, but the hint text stays inside. So if I click into it, this keeps telling me that this is a phone field. The focus at the border stays, and it clearly tells you that this is the field that you are on right now. And obviously, if you type in and stuff, it'll still be there. So that was why this particular feature, this particular control was something that I wanted to play with. And last on this app was Tooltip. And again, Tooltip is available out of the box. So why did I even think about revamping it? Two things. Tooltip is not customizable at all. You cannot control the font size of a tooltip in PowerApps. You cannot control the positioning of the tooltip. So no customization, which is always or never good. So you always want a little bit of customization and capabilities with any control. That was reason number one. I wanted to customize tooltips, make sure I position them where I want to. I can change the font color, the fill color, and so on and so forth to keep it in line with the theme of the app. And then second one, more importantly, was the out-of-the-box tooltips don't work on mobile apps because they only work when you hover over them, and there is no hover feature in a phone. So, and this happened when I was working on one of my projects, and I took a lot of time setting up all the tooltips for all the controls. And then the user was using the app on his phone, and he's like, I don't see any tooltips. And I was like, I'm pretty confident I configured all of them. And that's when I realized that these will not work on a phone. There is no hover functionality, and they're pretty useless if your app is primarily for a phone. So for those two reasons, I wanted to customize tooltips. And there are two different ways that a tooltip can show and hide per Google standards, of course. One is if a user clicks into a text input control as an example, the tooltip should remain there for 1.5 seconds. The second was if the user clicks into the field, the tooltip should show up, but if they click anywhere outside, the tooltip should go away.
Oh.
Yeah, so if I click into it, this remains and then goes away in 1.5 seconds. Or if I click into it and then I click outside, it goes away instantly. So a couple of nuances with tooltips. And if you're wondering the level of detail that Google has for these controls, let me give you a sneak peek.
Okay.
First of all, these are the controls that they have. Lots of them. And then for each control, they have, I don't even know, it almost seems like a PhD thesis.
Yeah.
And what is right, what is not right. And you can see so many examples that by the end of the article, you would be very knowledgeable
Yeah.
with UI standards for controls. So when I shared this, one user on Twitter came back and said, hey, I used your text input controls on one of my forms, and this is how it looks. So when he shared this, I was so happy.
Oh, wow.
This form, and again, when I say out-of-the-box controls are not pretty, I'm not questioning their functionality. They work awesome.
No. Yeah.
But a form like this, where the primary control is a text input control, would look very basic if we used out-of-the-box control. So this just made my day, and it looks awesome. So I love this, and I was very happy that somebody was actually using this in their projects. And then brief introduction to my next control, the date picker control. Like I said, no customization. I cannot control the font size. I cannot control the color. I cannot control the size of the control itself. A lot of things that I would like to do with the date picker control, I cannot do with the out-of-the-box date picker control. So here is the revamped date picker. And this is in a component form, so it can be easily shared and reused in different apps.
Okay.
And what you can do is, like you see this blue color, I wanted to just use this as an example and show that if my theme color is this blue, I can use this for my date control as well. I can still do all the functionality or all the controls you get with an out-of-the-box date picker control. So like first day of week can be changed from Sunday to Monday to any other day. And there are still a few features that I would like to expand this with. For example, I want the user to be able to type in a month of date, and then the date picker should, it should move directly to that particular year and month. So definitely a lot of things still possible, and I would strongly encourage anybody who wants to take this further to use this component and expand it. I'll be more than happy to see more features added to this one. And then the last one, and then we'll dive straight into it, is the sliding feature. So the reason this was exciting was because typically for navigation, we use buttons or the arrow, the right arrow or the left arrow.
Yeah.
And again, does it meet your needs? Yes. Is it cool? Maybe not. So I was using my, I think I had my wife's iPhone in my hands. And I think I had the Kindle app open, the Amazon Kindle app. And when you're reading a book, the easiest way to move from one page to another is just to swipe.
Yeah.
If we had to have buttons or icons that we had to click on, that would not add to the user experience, especially for phone apps. So thought, can we do that with PowerApps? And one general statement, if somebody asks you, or if you ask yourself, can you do this with PowerApps? The answer 9 out of 10 times is yes. So if you ever think that this would be a cool feature, strongly suggest to dive in and try it out. In most cases, you will be able to. Okay, so these are all that I do hope to cover today. And with that said, I'm going to start with these three real quick. So here is a blank canvas, and we will start with the text input control. And as you can expect, if you are revamping a text input control, you would need a text input control. So I'm going to add one, and there are a few, not few, there are a lot of properties that we will be playing with, but they're all required or necessary if you really want to follow Google standards. If you don't, if you just want to make it a bit like what we just showed, you can always ignore some of the properties, but I'm going to stick to their standards and show everything that is needed. So first would be pretty simple. Remove the default text. We don't want anything in there. Okay, it's pretty simple. Next is you can change the font size if you want. I'm going to change it to 20. I'm going to set the hint text to phone because we do want the hint text to be there all the time. Okay, and then I'm going to change the height to 90. Believe it or not, this is also specified by their standards. So yeah, I'm not obsessed with this height. It's just what they have suggested. Feel free to use a different value if you want. Few changes to the padding, and we will talk about why these are needed. I'm going to change the bottom padding to 0 and the left padding to 16. Left is needed because if you saw those controls earlier, the top edges are curved. So we want to make sure the text is slightly to the right of the curve and not directly under the curve. Bottom 0 because you want as much space as possible for the text that you will be typing in, and the hint text is going to go up. So you still need a lot of real estate for the text that you are expecting the user to type. So that's why we changed these two. Color, again, you can use any. I'm going to use a specific value or not. I'm going to leave it as black. Okay. So next value that we will change is border. I don't want any border because as we saw, it's the color of the control that specifies or highlights the existence of the control. We don't need a border for that. Next, focus border thickness. I never like to use this focus border property. I do understand that it's good from an accessibility perspective. So if you do have an accessibility requirement, you should use this, but if not, then ignore. Okay, fill color has to be a specific value for their standards. So 0.5, let's see how that looks. That's pretty neat. And then hover fill should also be the same right here. Okay, and then one more thing that we will do from a UI perspective is change the radius. So the top right will be changed to 10. The top left would also be 10. And then the bottom ones will be 0. We will start to see that this one is coming along as we expect it to. So now it looks somewhat like the final version. And then next property that we want to change is the onSelect property, and we will set a variable. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to call it secondary text visible property, which this is what I'll use to control the visibility of the hint text. And if you have guessed it, it's correct. I'm going to use another text input control to store the hint text. Yeah, because there's no way I can move the hint text within this control. So I need to have another control where I can move the hint text to. I'm going to set this to true. And then I'm going to make one more change to the top padding and say if my variable is true, change the top padding to 10. If not, 5. Because when I have another control inside, I want as much space for my text. I want to move it down. And otherwise, if not, I want to keep it at the same height as it normally is. So that's the justification for that control. So we are done with this one. And if you remember, we had a small bar at the end that used to change color. So the way you would do that is you add a rectangle, which is way down this list. I'm going to add one real quick. I'm going to add it right to the bottom of the text input control. Same width. Pretty straightforward until now. I'm going to change the height to 5. It's pretty big right now. It starts looking like how we want it to. And then you want to play with the fill color. I'm going to change and say if the secondary text is visible, which means the focus is on this control, set this to 8.5. If not, RGBA 56. And again, like I said, you don't have to use these same values, but okay, looks pretty neat. You want to test this out. So I'm going to add a label here, cover the entire screen. I don't want any text in that label, and I want to move this to the back. So I'm literally just using this as a back now.
Yeah.
I'm going to say send to back, and now I'm going to set the onSelect property of this one and say set that variable to false.
False.
Okay, let's test it out. If I've missed anything, maybe. Let's see if this is true. Color fade, gray. Okay. So I actually have it the exact opposite way.
we didn't actually even put any text in the text label. We just cleared it for now.
Yeah. Okay. So if you click into it, you show that it's prominent. But if you want to click out of it, you can just click anywhere else. And it goes back to its original state. Okay, so this works fine. And then the only remaining thing here is we will still want to have the hint text inside this control.
Yeah.
So for that, going to add another text input control and move it right at the top. And we will make a couple of cool changes here. For the default text, going to change this to the hint text of the other text input control. I'm going to say text input 1 dot hint text because the hint text for that one was phone, which is what I want to keep here. So change the font size to something small. It shouldn't be as big as your other control. And then I'm going to change, you can change the font weight if you want as well. I'm going to change that to semi-bold. The next thing that is important is changing the display mode to a disabled because you don't want the user to click here and start typing anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so that should take care of that. Now we want to control the visibility of this control. It should not be visible all the time, only when the user clicks into your primary text input control. So you would say, if my text input 1 text, if my first text input control is not blank, then use the variable that we created, else set it to true. Okay, and then a few more changes here. Height needs to be less than that, so 32. Same thing with the padding here as before. Top one will be 10, bottom 10. and then left padding 16 because to account for the curve, and then right one 5. Same thing with border 0, and then since we have set the display mode to disabled, we don't want to play with color and fill. You can if you want, but the only properties that will have an impact will be disabled color and disabled fill. So for that, I'm going to change the disabled color to pretty cool blue, I think this is. Yep. And then disabled fill would be something like this to match your other fill color. So it seems as if it's the same one text input control and not two different ones.
So,
Okay.
could it?
Yes.
So, in this case, I realized on previous episodes that our other guests shared. So, for instance, you could have like a theme and have variable names for the colors, and instead of retyping the colors, you could kind of like just call these themes and perfect.
Yeah. So like one thing that I typically do is I initialize variables on the app start. So say set primary color, just for the sake of it, I'm going to use white, and then set secondary color and set that to black. Run your app on start, and then whenever you need to use these colors, your theme colors, you can use the variables instead of specifying the color. And the reason why that's cool is because if somebody comes back and says, hey, I don't want these colors, change your theme pink and green. All you need to do is change the values once, and you will be good. So that one is huge. So strongly suggest using those variables. And then let's see. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that when the user clicks out of it, we want to hide that. And so the visible property was
negation of that.
Yeah. So we want to make sure that this variable is set correctly, which will be based on, and I think my cursor froze. Okay. Which will be based on the on change property of the text input control. So I'm going to go back to my app for a second, the one that I have, instead of trying to think on the fly.
Yeah, just copy that code.
Yeah, just give me that on change property.
Yeah.
So it is right here, and when this expands, so let me see real quick. I have used a couple of variables. So this was one of the changes that I was working on yesterday. Is for whatever reason, when I started off, I was using a couple of variables, which trust me, we don't have to. So again, when I started off, I really wasn't sure what I was doing. So I was playing around with a lot of variables, and that was not cool. I wanted to minimize minimize it to as less variables as possible. Okay, so let's make sure we want to go to the label background color, which is the label that we added for the background, and we will set that. Where was my app? Right here. So I'm going to go back to this and real quick make sure that, okay. So when a user clicks into this, we want to make sure that this gets hidden, and missing one property somewhere, and I'm trying to figure out which one. Let's see. Go to the primary control, set visible to true, and let's see. I'm gonna try to open my other app, which is probably this. Okay. So go back to my primary control real quick, and I apologize for this. It's been a while since I played with this, so I'm gonna do one simple thing here. Test this one out, make sure this one is working fine. Perfect. So I want to make sure that this is correct, and then my other text input control is basically not doing anything, which is cool. And then its visible property says right here, if this is, so pretty simple thing that I missed, which was right here for my second text input control, the visible property is if my text input one is blank, then I want to use that variable if not true. So that was one simple change that I missed, and that's it. So when I click into it, this second text input control becomes visible. The focus bar, as Google calls it, changes its color, and then the user can type in, and then if they type out, it still remains there until the user gets out of the control.
Out of the control. Okay.
Yeah, and if they type something, and then when they go out of control, the hint text still stays there, but the focus bar changes its color to the original color, basically telling the user that you're not focusing on this control right now. Okay, so that should be it for the text input control. We will use the same control to create a tooltip for it. So for the tooltip, pretty simple, add a label. And this is the label that we will use for the tooltip itself, which is why you get all the customizations possible, because it's a label. You can do whatever you want with it. And what I'll do in addition to that is I'll also set the default or the out-of-the-box tooltip of this text input control so we can compare the two. I'm going to call it business phone for the lack of a better tooltip. Then I'll move it around a bit, and even the positioning of the tooltip has been specified in the standards. But since if you want to customize it, you can move it here, you can move it there, you can move it any way you want. Okay, so for my primary text input control, I'm going to add one more thing to its onSelect property, which is another variable that says display tooltip to true. When a user clicks into it, make this variable true, and I'll control the visibility of the tooltip using this variable. Once that is done, and then I want to add to the background label that I have that set that variable to false, because remember, one of the ways that you want the tooltip to go away is when a user clicks anywhere else. So I'm going to set this to false. Pretty simple. And now we will make this beautiful. So text would be right here, business phone. And again, the length of the tooltip will depend on the amount of text you have. I have just 2 words, so it's pretty simple. I'm going to change the font size to a small size, text alignment middle, so I can compress the width. I'm going to change this to, I don't know, about 150, and then change the height as well. It's starting to look how I want it to. I'm going to position it right at the middle. In some cases, you might want to position it to the left or to the right. Feel free to do that. And then a little bit of padding. Again, these two probably are just my OCD to make sure that they are compressed enough. Keep it at 5, it still works fine. Okay, next thing is color. But actually, before that, one thing. You want to change the display mode again of this one, because you don't want the user to do anything with that label. Okay, so then you set the disabled color and the disabled fill. So disabled color, I'll set it to white, which obviously right now makes it invisible until we change the disabled fill. I'm going to set that to a shade of blue. 78, 1. Mr. Comment. Yep. Cool. Looks good. And then one last thing, of course, is change the visible property of this to base it off of the variable. That's it. So this should take care of one of the 2 requirements, that when a user clicks into it, it should remain prominent until the user clicks out of it. And let us add the, okay, so we added the default tooltip. Let me make sure we did. Yep. Let's take a look at how this one is.
Mm.
It moves around with your
The
cursor,
cursor,
which may
yeah.
not be ideal. I cannot change the background. I cannot change the color. And I'm basically stuck with a black control right now with white text, which, if you think about it, if your app has, I don't know, a dark theme, this is kind of sort of useless. So because of this, I really wanted to focus on the tooltip. And like I said, if I could show my phone right now, this default tooltip doesn't even show.
Show up, yeah.
So that meets one of the two requirements. And then the next requirement was make it hide after 1.5 seconds. So anything to do with time, you would always need the timer control.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change this to 1500 milliseconds, which is 1.5 seconds.
Yep.
And then at the start of the timer, or I'll base the start of the timer on that same variable. So when the tooltip becomes visible, start the timer.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when the timer ends, set the visibility variable
To false.
to false.
Awesome.
Okay. And then I will also, yeah, that should be it. And then the reset property of the timer, because I want this timer to run every time a user clicks into it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to say that it is the invert of the display tooltip variable.
Okay.
Okay. And then after this, after we test it out, we can always hide it. So now when I click into it and I don't do anything, it goes away in 1.5 seconds.
Okay, cool.
And I can still click and click out and then it still goes away. So I'm going to hide this timer because I don't want to use this to see. And that's it. We have a revamp text input control with a customized tooltip.
Cool.
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Next is the floating action button. And the only reason I'm going to use another app for it is because I need to have those images.
Okay, yeah.
I think I do somewhere, but instead of wasting time finding those images in my not so messy desktop, I'm just gonna, yeah, that will not be fun for sure. So I'm gonna add.
So far as the concept is there, I think that's fine. Because what most people, if not, probably use those images any which way. So once we can use an image to illustrate the concept, and I think the viewers will be super excited.
Yeah, and I guess one of the main concepts about this floating action button is you don't need to have images. You could simply have buttons.
Yeah.
The relevant text, and you could just hide or show those buttons instead of images. The one thing to consider when using a floating action button is those buttons or those images should have some connectivity, some logic to them. You cannot have, you can have if you want, but it won't be a good user experience where you have those options, buttons or images that are completely unrelated to each other. One good example would be if you want to contact somebody, when a user clicks into that floating action button, you provide different ways of contacting email, phone. So that still makes sense. But a bad example would be when a user clicks on the floating action button, they get options like, I want to navigate to another screen. I want to create an email. I want to create a new record. Those are completely unrelated actions. That would not be a good user experience. Okay, so like I said, the reason that I'm using this is only because I have these images already added here. With that said, I'm going to add my first image real quick. Right here, image. I'm going to set that to the call logo. It's currently not visible because it's transparent. Change the width and height to 100. Going to change its position to something further down, right here. And then X position can be anything. I'm going to use a value that I've used a lot. This gives a good enough position for this control. So no padding, nothing else needed. And I'm going to set the onSelect property of this to say, show my menu to true. Okay, with that done, I'm going to add a button. Same size, so 100, 100. And you want to make it look like a circle. So the way you do that is pretty cool. Is you can change the radius to a value. Think this should do it. The tab doesn't work in these properties for some reason. Okay. Cool. I don't want any text in here. And by the way, creating or making a button look like a circle is something I picked from Brian.
Yeah.
So yeah, credit goes to him to allow me to do this, which is a very important part of my floating action. Because if not for this, I would have just given up on this project. I'm gonna send this to
forward. We are paying it forward.
Yes, exactly. So okay, so this looks cool, and I moved it back because I want the call button to be in front of the button. The call button literally just acts like a background for my image. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to add my second control real quick, which is a cancel icon, which I want to use to close the menu or hide the menu. So position it exactly where we have the other controls. In fact, every control, every image will be positioned at the same position. Okay, so it's probably slightly different. Let me check what these are. 8980. So this should be good. Oh, of course, this should be 100. Yep, and then I need to pad it up a bit because I don't want if I don't do that, the X, given its shape, will show outside of the call button, which I don't want. And then now it's completely hidden behind it. And then once that is done, I'm going to change its color to white. I'm going to change that real quick here. And I'm going to add one more button for its background. So I'm going to group the first image and button I added. I'm going to add another button real quick. And it's right here. Same thing, 100, 100. This was, I believe, 465, 980. And then padding changes, or the radius changes to 100, 100, 100. Shouldn't have any text. And the button should go behind the icon. Awesome. So now the onSelect property of this would be the exact opposite. Set show menu to false, because I want to use this button, I want to use this icon to hide my expandable buttons. Okay. Call logo button, which is right here. I want to control its visibility because I don't want it to be visible all the time.
All the time, yeah.
So I'm going to say show menu, and then I'm going to group the other two icon and buttons, so I don't have to change the property for both of them separately. And I will change the visibility property of this to show menu, because when the menu is visible, when it's expanded, that's when I want the close icon to show. When it's not visible, I want the call button to show. So pretty simple. And then now is when I will start adding images real quick. So there'll be 4 of them. I'll start off with WhatsApp. Same thing. I'll at least change the size and then move them where I want them to be. So WhatsApp, then Messenger, 100, 100. Not the position, but the width and height. And then the last 2, Skype, same thing, 100, 100. And then lastly, it would be, I think, Viber. I honestly don't think if many people use it now,
But
but
lately, yeah, it's more WhatsApp and Telegraph.
yep. I was just looking for random call app uh, on Google, and
Yeah, that
somehow
works.
Viber showed up. So okay, so WhatsApp, Messenger. I need to change the padding of some of these images to make sure
Yeah, they
they
are
are
within.
completely
Yeah.
hidden. And then same thing with this guy. And this is what I was saying. These don't need to be images. You could have buttons.
Hmm?
It just depends on what your requirement is. In this case, an icon makes more sense
A
um,
button.
than a button. So, okay, next thing is once this is done, we would want to control the Y position. And more importantly, I want to bring the call button and the close button forward
Hmm?
because those are the ones I want to be visible, right? By
Visible. Yeah.
default.
Yeah.
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 Okay, now that that's done, the basic concept here is you want to change the Y position of the images or the buttons that are hiding behind. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start off with something very simple and then we'll make it better. So what I'm saying is if show menu is true, which is when this is expanded,
Expanded. Yeah.
I want to change this to, I don't know, 860, which is about 120 above.
Hmm.
And then for the others, same thing. I'm going to keep a gap of 100. So this will be 760. And same thing for the other one, 660. And then for the last one, 560. And the else condition would be the same for all because when the menu is not expanded, you want all of them at the same
At the
position
same place.
behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this should be good for us to test it out. So they
Oh.
show up and then they hide. They should hide if I set the on select property correctly of the icon. I don't have it right here, so this should be show
Yep.
set it to false.
False.
Now it should work fine. So
Yep.
this is cool, but what it doesn't give you is a smooth transition.
Hmm?
The buttons just show up or hide in a flash. So to change that again, if you ever need transition, if you ever want something to be based on it on if you ever want a smooth transition, you would need a
Timer.
time.
Yeah.
Most powerful control. And this particular piece that I'm going to show you right now is so useful, not just in this, but to give you another example, I created a small tennis app where I wanted the tennis ball, so I had a ball machine right here, and then I have had a player or a racket down here. So I wanted to get the ball moving in a smooth way. And the way I did that was use a timer to change the position of this is what we're going to do right now real quick. I'm going to set the duration to 500.
Okay.
You can set it to anything, but you don't want your transition to be very sluggish.
Yeah.
Okay, so timer is done. It's pretty simple. I'm going to say on timer start. I'm going to set the start property of the timer to a variable. Timer show, and and then going to set the reset property to the opposite because we want it to work again. So timer show var. Now, where do I define these variables? I'm going to go here. And the only reason we didn't get any error right now is because I have another screen where I created this. So these variables exist.
Okay.
But if this was a new app, when I would have specified these values for a timer, they would have thrown an error because these variables are not defined yet.
Fine.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the call and say expand its onSelect property and say, right here, say set timer show var to true, and one more because we'll need another timer.
Okay.
One to take it up, another to bring it down.
They're down. Okay.
So I'm going to set this to false. When I'm using the call button, I want to start the time, set the variable for the show timer to true and the hide timer to false. And then similarly for the icon, I'm going to expand its onSelect property by doing the exact opposite. Show timer to false, hide timer to true. And I'm going to add another timer because we need another one to hide it. Same thing. Duration will be 500. Could be anything. But if you set it lower than this, they come out so quick it almost loses its transition. And if it's slow, it looks really bad. It just looks like your application is going to hang. So similar things here as well. The start property will be timer hide variable, and then reset will be the opposite. Timer hide. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to change, or we want to set the Y property of the images based on these timers. So going back here, initially we had it very simple. When the show menu variable is true, set it to a certain value. If not, set it to a different value. We will change that and say if timer show var is true, instead of 860, what I want to say is start off with 980 and subtract 120, but multiply this with timer 3 dot value divided by timer 3 dot duration. The reason why this is cool is because say if you have a timer, in our case with a duration of 500, the timer value at the beginning will be 0. So this ratio will be 0, which means the Y position will be 980. As the timer moves forward, when it ends, its value will be 500 as well. So this ratio will become 1, and then slowly its Y position would have changed in increments of 1 from 980 to 860. So, and then I want to add one more condition for hiding it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. 860. Now we will add 120 to it. And same thing with a duration, a value by duration ratio. And an else condition to all of this, that if any of these is not happening, just keep it behind the call logo. And real quick now, change this for everyone. So instead of this, it will be 220. It will be 760. So same thing here. 320 and 660. And last, it will be 420, I think. And this will be 560, I think.
I think we need to. We also need to go back and change the second part to the various values because we didn't change them. So I think if you check images 3 and 4, the second part is supposed to be 20.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Same thing here. It should be 320. Awesome. Somebody is definitely watching it with a lot of attention. More than me, which is good. So let's test it out now. Beautiful run. And again, like I said, if you want let me show this real quick. If we set this to 200,
Yeah, that's going to be very fast. Yeah.
so again, it's a variable that is available to anybody who wants to use this,
Use
but
this. Yeah.
now this is bad,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? So 500 is that optimal value. To 300, 400 might still work, but
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't use anything greater than 500. Okay, so this was the floating action button, and so we've looked at floating action button, the text input control and tooltip. I'm not going to take a lot more time on the others, which is why I wanted to spend as much time as possible on these.
Yeah.
Date picker, I'm not going to create it, but I'm going to show you how I arrived at it.
Okay. Yeah, that works fine.
Because once you arrive at it, creating that as a component is pretty easy. And same thing with this text input control. When I showed this for the first time in a user group meeting, the biggest feedback I got was, we don't want to be doing this every single time. So how about you create a component for this?
Yeah.
Creating that was my first component, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Everything is customizable. So once you have the control, though, making it a component is pretty simple. You just copy all these controls, put it in a component, fiddle with whatever values you want to give the user as an input, and then use those input properties to set values in your control.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the next thing we're going to ask. That okay, you've done it. So how do we now make it a component? But I mean, you said that. Cool.
It's as simple as, say I want to use all of these, right? So I copy these. I'm going to add it here. Some might throw an error, some may not. Now I have it, but I don't want my component to include all the white space that you see.
Yeah.
So I start off with something very simple. And again, you move it here. Yeah. You don't want your component size to be more than your text input control. So you just come here and say, change this to whatever we have here, which is, I think, 560-90.
Yeah.
So if I do that real quick, that's step one for your component. And then again, if I just want to keep it like this, it'll still work. But I want the user to be able to specify the font size, the font type.
Yeah.
So you just start adding one real example here. You start adding values. So say I have font type, custom property one. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to say it's text, create. And then when I go to my text input control one, I can go to the font property, which is right here, and say component one dot whatever custom property one, which I didn't rename, which I should have.
Yeah.
Now when I pass on a value to this variable or to this input property of this component, it'll pick that dynamically and set the font.
Okay.
That's just a quick example. You can set as many as you want. Depends on how much customizations you want to allow for your component.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at how I started with the date picker control. So for that, I'm going to switch to a tablet app. This was awesome because given the amount of pain I've had with the date picker control and the ease with which I was able to get past it was awesome. And trust me, this was not my effort. This is whoever created this template screen. So right here, you have a calendar screen.
Oh, okay.
So I looked at the screen and I was like, this looks awesome. Way more customizable than what we have out of the box. So now when I choose a calendar here, that is when the date picker control will show up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This looks awesome. So what I did was I literally copied all these. I'm gonna select these first, then the label, then this. Copied these into another screen, blank screen. So I have all the controls I need. I didn't need this. I think I can remove this safely. Okay. Now I just wanted to fiddle with it and give some input, give some properties. So the way I did that was the only variables that I changed was, so this is a gallery, which is not easily prominent. when you look at it, but it is. So its items property right here is calendar.weekday short.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
want to use that. So I just set it to something very simple.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I wanted control over my first day of week.
Week. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So to begin with, it was as simple as this. Here, done, it gives you the same result as it was earlier. Okay, so that was one change. And since I wanted to change some of its values and to test, I added a button. And what I did was, the onSelect property of this button was set using the onSelect property of this calendar icon.
Okay. Yeah.
I could have used that same one, but either way, so copy these properties. It basically resets the calendar and brings it back to today.
Okay.
So on select property right here to do exactly the same. And then I'm gonna add a toggle because I want the user to be able to decide what day, if they want Sunday to be the first day of week or Monday. And same way, you can expand it to allow different days of week, but these two are obviously the most common values. So I'm going to say false text will be Monday and true text will be Sunday. So pretty simple, and default will be true, which is Sunday. And then expand so the user can see it. And then gonna select its on check property and say set first day Sunday. It's a variable that I'm creating. I'm setting that to true. And the on unchecked, when I change it to false, set this to false. You don't have to do that. You can use toggle.value if you want. But when I was creating this, I was, testing out, and I didn't want to, for whatever reason. I think I was just being lazy. So now the first thing we want is when a user toggles this, I want this gallery to change.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to say if first day Sunday is true, use this.
Yes. Okay.
Else, I'm going to copy this.
Copy and swap that. Yeah.
Then I want to start off with Monday. And that's it. So let's test it out.
Oh.
So the gallery moves, which is good. And let me move this a bit to the right. And okay, perfect. So this toggle works, at least changes this. Now we want to make sure that it changes the first day of the week in the calendar. So it's pretty simple. If first day Sunday is true, the weekday function is one where you can specify your day of week. So what you will add here is start of week dot Sunday. Okay, and then if not,
pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, this whole thing. Instead of Sunday, it will be Monday.
Yeah.
And if I close this, that should take care of it. But let's not believe it. Let's test it out. Now let's toggle. And did that do anything? Probably not. Let's check what happened. So, I need to toggle, and then I need to click this.
Okay, yeah.
So 10th Sunday, and then if I select this, the 10th is going to move here and Sunday.
Yeah.
And these still work. So these buttons still allow me to move back and forth. And this was, like I said, using that template screen, was able to create this in like 15 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah.
And then obviously the next step was to create a component out of it. Similar approach as I showed for the text input control. Copy everything, create a component, customize everything that you want. And just to give you an example, I'm going to go directly into my component that I have and show you the number of properties I have. It's crazy. Same thing with the date picker control. I think I had something like, I don't know, 50 properties. So real quick, so if I go to my component here, or even so, my component to begin with looks very scary, uh, which is right now obviously I don't have any values defined for it. But when I do, so this is another version of the same date picker control, completely different. And here I have three different versions, so to speak. The font is different, the color is different, the size of the control is different.
So different, yeah.
Everything is controllable. And if you go to the component, these are the properties I have. So main color, secondary color, header font, header width, header height, text font, and first day of week. So pretty simple. Creating a component out of a control is pretty easy. What I would strongly suggest is first create a control that you want, and then try to replicate that in a component. Don't try to create a component from the word go. So that's that. And then last was, I think, one of the ones on which you commented, Samuel, which was the sliding functionality to navigate.
Yeah.
So that one, again, I think I owe a lot to whoever creates these sample screens. The inspiration for that was the tutorial screen. I could have used a standard screen, a blank screen, and then had, I don't know, 5 different screens and navigate from one to another. That would have been easy, because all I would have had to say was
navigate.
Navigate. And the main building block of this is a slider control. So what I have here is, and you don't need to have 3, I was playing around with it, but I have a slider control. If I make it visible, it actually is, where is it? Oh, I've set its color to transparent, so you won't see it. But because it has to be on top of everything else, because you want the user to be able to click on it and navigate. So if this would have been a screen navigation, all I would have had to say was, when that slider value increases, navigate to screen 2. When I'm on screen 2, when the slider value increases, go navigate to screen 3. When the slider value on screen 2 reduces, navigate to screen 1. That was easy. So this one is interesting because it has a gallery right here, which is the navigator. And if I add the screen, we can see how this looks. So you have a navigation gallery here. And then what it does is it lets you click on the arrow and moves the gallery to the next row. So using these icons, it's pretty straightforward, but I wanted to remove these and use a slider control instead.
Oh, okay.
So what I did here, the only property or the only 2 properties I had to play with was on select and on change. So when you select the slider, it stores the current value. And the slider value I've set from a range of 0 to 2000. Doesn't really matter what your maximum value is. It could be 1000, it could be 5000. But the bigger the range, the easier it is to figure out the difference between the new. Obviously, if it's 0 to 5, your precision will not be as much because your slider will only move 5 times. So to make it a bit smooth, I set the value to 2000. Now, on select, it stores the slider's current value. Why this is important is because you cannot expect the user to slide completely from 0 to 2000, from beginning to end. They might slide just this much and then they stop, because it should allow them to navigate irrespective of the amount of slide or amount of transition or movement that they're doing on the slider control. So when they select it, I am retaining the slider's current value. Now, the on change property says if the slider dot value is greater than the current value, this function right here is literally from the right arrow that we have on the template screen. If
Okay.
this seems
Okay.
complicated, I am definitely not the one who wrote this. Um, if you were doing a simple navigation, all you would have had here was navigate to screen 2. And then else condition, which means the slider value is less than the current value, do something else. Now, this is exactly what the left icon in the template screen does. In your case, on screen 2, it would be navigate to screen 1.
One. Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to test it out, and I was sliding using my
Right.
cursor, and I can slide as much as I want. Right
Yeah. It
here,
always
entire
jumps.
screen,
Yeah.
or just this much, and it works fine. And then of course, there was no way for me to capture this cursor, so I wanted to test it out on my phone. So I went to my Android and on iPhone,
Yeah.
set some properties of my phone to allow the touch to be visible,
Mm.
and then I was sliding, and then it worked fine. So I was pretty happy with it. And yeah, I think this would make a good. This would be pretty useful even if it's your basic screen navigations,
Yeah.
to not waste space for buttons or icons. Or like I was telling you earlier, if you're trying to implement some kind of an e-reader, I don't know, if probably you're showing just a PDF control,
Yeah.
a PDF in your app, and you want the users to be able to navigate, this just makes it pretty easy
Easier.
to
Yeah.
move. And more importantly, which is something I take as a personal challenge all the time, is it makes your Power App look like a native app, work like a native app.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, pretty simple, using a very simple out of the box control. And this is the kind of thing I really want to encourage, that a timer control, at least when I started with Power Apps, seemed like a very limited control that I could use that only when I wanted to do something after a certain duration.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh, if I want to say if I create a landing page of my or a home page for my app, and it just has my company's logo, and I want to show that home page only for 5 seconds, and then take the user to the actual first landing page of the app. I would add a timer to my home page,
Yeah.
set its value to 5 seconds, and then on timer end,
And yeah.
navigate to.
Yeah.
And my usage was limited to that, but these things helped me understand that I could use a timer to, I don't know, like create a smooth transition of a control, which is awesome. And similarly, for a slider, the initial use case in my mind was, if I want to change the value from 0 to 1 or 2, I would use a slider. And which is obviously a primary use case for a slider control. But right here, instead of the value, the focus is on the on change property of the slider. So I'm really not concerned what the actual value is. I'm only concerned if the new value of the slider is greater than the old value or lesser than the old
Oh
value.
yeah. Okay.
So, strongly suggest going here to the insert tab, look at all these controls, have fun with them, do whatever you think you can. Um, Look at a few native apps on your phone, see some cool features, try to implement them here. Trust me, this section here has a lot more power than what we think it does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So,
true.
so yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I took more time than I was supposed to, but
No,
really wanted to
it
share.
was worth it. It was really worth it. It was worth it. You don't worry about that, because all the things you show, from the comments coming in, like, this is very nice and easy, and comments came in that you made this, very simple and straightforward to do. So hey, that's most important for us. Not necessarily about the time, but yeah, that's
Awesome.
very important. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So all these components, all these, like this is not a component, for example, but this whole structure, or how did I implement this? So whether it's a blog post or a component or a control, all of these are shared on my blog and in the community forums. So if you go to my blog, thepoweraddict.com, and yeah, I was not being very original when I created my username. Uh, but it is what it is. It's very difficult for me to change it now. So yeah, my Twitter handle is the Power Addict. My blog site is the Power Addict. But yeah, that kind of shows my creativity or the lack of it. But if you go to my blog, you will see all these controls and how I implemented them shared and documented. So if you want to follow along, you can either look at those instructions step by step, or obviously you can watch this video, which is awesome. Thanks to Samuel. Um, and you can even go to the community forums and see my articles there. So none of this is proprietary. None of this is my own property. This is for everybody who wants to use Power Apps. Feel free to go in. And more importantly, if you have further enhancements that you want to make or further enhancements that you want me to make, like today, somebody reached out on Twitter and said, for your date input control, can you allow passing a date value to the component so I can highlight a certain date? For example, I don't know if you are using a display form and you only want to show the value or default the value to a certain value that's already on your record, it would be helpful that you can specify the default value that should be selected on your date picker control, because selecting today or today's date is always not the use case that you would want. So like that, if you have questions, if you have feedback, feel free to reach out. Or if you can make those changes yourself, please do. And then please share that with the community.
Yep, yep, yep. You heard it from the man himself. The most important thing is for you to share it. I mean, that's why we do this. We learn something, we create something, and then we share it so people can pick it, build upon it, and even make it better. There is this, school of thought that says, do we think as power addicts and power users, do we think that Microsoft should spend time making the components fancy, or they should just spend time giving us the tools within Power Apps to build our fancy components and controls? I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, that's something that is, there's been a lot of talk about.
I think giving us the building blocks is probably the right approach for me, because if they give components, it kind of sort of becomes the same situation like right now, where you have been given I don't know, a starting block or a building block, and not sure how many people would actually think of making changes to those because they are easily available.
Yeah.
um, and giving the building blocks, the reason why it helps is because I'm not constrained within the boundaries that is set by something that is given to me. I can use my own imagination, I can use my own skills and make it as awesome as possible. And yeah, like all these components that you saw, and trust me, there are way more cooler components on the community. I'm not sure if, or I'm not sure how much they would have benefited with a component to begin with versus getting all the building blocks that we have. So my suggestion and my feedback has been to add some properties or to allow us to add some properties to components. I think that one is slightly more important in my opinion. To give you an example, the text input control component that we created, we added a background on which we had to click to
Mm.
get the user's focus out of it. That would have helped. It would have been easier if we were allowed to add a property to the component that
Yeah.
says when the user is out of focus of the
Focus. Yeah.
component,
Yeah.
do this. So there are a few things that definitely that Microsoft can do, and again, it depends. If you are a heavy user, you probably would not benefit a lot from a component given to you by Microsoft.
Yeah.
You would benefit more from properties that they can add to components, or
Yeah.
the building blocks that they can give. But I think it'll still be useful for users that are getting started with Power Apps and who still don't like the out of the box controls. So I think it's ideal thing would be to do both.
Yeah.
Uh, but if I had to pick one, I would pick the building blocks.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, guys, you heard it. We are 1 hour 34 minutes into it. A bit longer, but what's the wait? Because we started a bit late. But then, hey, we've seen cool tips and tricks on how to do it. Very simple and straightforward. I'm sure most of you were thinking, I mean, this is complicated. How can I do this? But had it just made it look like a breeze? Had it Thank you very, very much. This was very awesome. It's not over. This is just the first of many appearances. We'll be calling on you to give us, some more cool stuff at the right time. And like you
For
do
sure.
it on the show, uh, we always want to introduce the next person coming for the Power series. And I mean, just to make sure Hadith can see this, let me go ahead and flip this so at least you can see the output. So now what you're seeing is the out so what you're seeing now is the output of my stream. So this now we have, with a round of applause, we have David Abu coming up next session. He's going to be talking to us. He's going to talk to us about AI visuals in Power BI. So, don't miss this for anything. Make a date with us next Sunday to see the awesome, awesome stuff that he has. But back to you, Hadid. So now, what next are we expecting? What have you been working on that, anything you want to share? I mean, that you are permitted to share. Because I know that the.
Um, One other thing that I'm working on right now is, and again, it's because I've seen a lot of apps being shared on the community for kids.
Hmm?
Um, and those are all awesome. I think Matthew Devaney created one. Alan's, if I'm not wrong, it was Alan Chai's daughter who created one. So there have been some awesome apps. So this benchmark is pretty high. Um, but I wanted to create one which will not just be fun but also educational. And the theme that I had picked was I'm going to create a math quiz app.
Mm.
So the users or the kids will be presented with equations, and there will be some components of the equations that will be blank. For example, in some
Oh,
cases,
filling the spaces.
yeah, in some cases, I might leave the operators.
Hmm?
In some cases, I might leave certain digits.
Mm.
So you either have to fill in the operators or you might have to fill in the digits to get to the end result. So the end result will always be visible. So filling the blanks to get to the end result.
And result. Wow. That is that
So
is cool.
yeah, still in the early stages. Obviously, running into some challenges like if I'm creating random numbers using the rand function.
Hmm?
Where it becomes difficult is when I get to a point where I have to divide two numbers. I have to make sure that the two numbers are
Divisible.
divisible.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, if it's 8 divided by 3, that's not going to help
Yeah.
my case because it's
Yeah.
like nobody's to take out a calculator to do that.
Do that. Yeah.
So that is my current challenge. Figure out a way that the denominator is multiple of or a clear and again my math terminology
Yeah.
is very bad. So maybe I'll use
It's a
this app to improve
factorial or
my
whatever that is.
yeah, I think I'll use this app to improve my terminology as well. But yeah, so I want to make sure that the ratio is clear or clean. That is the biggest challenge right now because I have to create one random number based on another random number and still kind of not make it random enough to cause these problems.
Yeah. Problems.
So once that is done, I should be able to release the app with the community. So that I'm really looking forward to that one.
Well, I'm sure the community will be ready to jump on it and help. So, I mean, as you've mentioned it, I know a lot of them are watching, so I'm sure they probably started thinking about, how could we do that?
Yeah,
So, definitely, I'm sure, pretty soon we're going to see that out there in the community. Well, Harit,
yeah.
once again, thank you so much for honoring and for making today's session an awesome one. It's always, an awesome time spending with you people. So, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully, as time goes by, we'll probably call on you again, come and give us some other, probably by that time you're done with the math stuff, and you can probably come and share that
Sure.
again on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, viewers, listeners, this has been another awesome episode of the Power Series. Until I come your way next week, stay safe, stay healthy, and hey, learn something new, share something new. Let's make the world a better place. I am out.